this sort of bright, sweet specialty espresso. You put sugar in it, it tastes like lemon.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a customer coming to me, this is like 12 years ago. And I said, oh, try it without the sugar. And they did. And they said, oh, so you know it goes sour with the sugar in? And I was like, well, yeah. And they said, why didn't you tell me? And I remember being like, that's a fair point.
Hey coffee nerds. I'm super excited today because I'm going to be jumping on a call in just a few seconds with a man who has done a lot of things for the specialty coffee industry. He has written a book, Water for Coffee. He has designed a water filter specifically for specialty coffee. And he also has a coffee roastery based out of Bath, UK, among many other things that he does, which we're going to get into in this conversation. But I won't bore you with all the details down the intro. This is Maxwell Colonna-Dashwood. So let's get right into it. Maxwell, you on the call? We'll get into some of these questions and get you chatting.
Yeah, no, thanks. I appreciate the opportunity. And you'll have to edit this out, Brodie.
No, this is all staying in. How many dogs do you have?
2. Pippin and Luca, the postman. But I come from an art sort of background. My father's a sculptor. My first real vocation, I guess, was portraiture. I specifically chose not to go to university. I was doing art at the time and I didn't really understand the many virtues of an art degree. I still don't really understand them. And I went traveling. I did a lot of traveling. I got a bunch of different jobs. I worked in a petrol station to save up to go traveling for 9 months. I worked on vineyards in New Zealand. And yeah, I didn't really have any particular immediate career ambitions. I was exploring things I like doing, seeing the world. And those jobs, which were simply to earn a bit of money to do whatever the project was, I really enjoyed them. I really liked the petrol station job. Although I later realized it was probably because it was a local community petrol station. When I had to go and do a shift on the motorway, it was horrible. Yeah. Because no one's friendly on the motorway. Everyone's just angry. Anyway, I really loved these jobs, and I came back. I was working in a bar, and I was doing portraiture and other artwork. I got quite busy with the artwork, and I guess it was my first sort of experience of running your own business, really. You know, you're like a one-person band, and you're managing that, and it's quite, portraiture is quite, it sells itself in a way. Like, as far as art goes, people get likenesses of other people, right?
Yeah.
I got so busy, I had to give up the hospitality, which, I know for a lot of people who do hospitality as a side job is the dream, right? But I was sat doing all this artwork, and I was like, I don't like this. I now realize I really like people. I'm gregarious and extrovert. But it wasn't just that. I didn't just like the hospitality because I like people. They're just really interesting environments. Every customer that comes through the door is different. They engage with the space and the staff and the products. I just found it way more interesting than the artwork. And I think my dad's only just forgiven me that I decided to not pursue art. Yeah, I met my wife, Leslie, whilst I was working in this bar in the New Forest, which is a southern part of England. And we said, okay, let's do some more traveling. And I'd already used my New Zealand work visa. So we had an Australian work visa. And we basically used the artwork to save up some money. And we did 6 months in India, which was, full on. And then ended up in Australia with a work visa in Melbourne. And, you look at it now like, oh, well, you went to Melbourne to do coffee. I was like, no, just turned up there. And 2006. And basically just got a job in the CBD in the middle of the city. And it wasn't, it was a conference center cafe, opened late on the weekends and had some wine, like a wine bar. And just very quickly, you couldn't be involved in hospitality in Melbourne and not be aware of the requirement people had around coffee. Like, the people talk about who made the best coffee, where the best coffee was. And even in this bar, which was not a specialty coffee shop at all, there was an expectation you could do latte art. And I was like, this latte art thing is really hard. I remember as an artist thinking I should be able to do this. Yeah. And I found it really frustrating for the first 4 or 5 months. But I was fascinated by people's obsession with it. But I also found it really interesting that I've done some mundane jobs, like cutting vines is mundane. Picking kiwi flowers is really mundane. And then you have some jobs which there's something about them where the day just flies by and it was enjoyable. And I found coffee making like that. And I was like, that's interesting. And I just started to dig a bit. And one of the regulars at this cafe said, oh, you should go up the road on your lunch break to a place called Brother Baba Boudin on a street called Little Burke Street. And I went up there and didn't really have any naming on the front. It was clearly very cool and hip. And I went in and there was actually this woman serving who was super friendly. And I asked for espresso. And it was the first time anyone had said to me, well, we've got this espresso from a specific place that tastes a specific way. And I remember I've been trying to get into whiskey for a while and I just found it hard to taste because it's just like fire. I'm actually a bit better at whiskey tasting now, but I think I assumed that I wouldn't get what she was talking about, that it would just taste like coffee to me, right? And I stood outside on the pavement, I had this drink, and honestly, it was like a life-altering experience. I was like, well, hang on a minute. Why have I had to travel around the world, get a job, then be given the advice to go down a side alley to find this cafe to drink something that tastes like this? And why does it taste like this? And your brain starts going, how much of it is the way it was made, the roaster, the origin, all of the questions. And yeah, I immediately decided there on that sidewalk, I was going to change jobs. So I went to find a job as a full-time barista. And it's just that was the beginning of the rabbit hole, right? And Leslie, my wife, was working in an office down the road, and then in the CBD as well. It's quite cool. We had our weekends off. We'd go visit roasteries. We just soak it all up. And I started going on courses. As you could probably tell by my character type, I was quite critical of those courses. So just, I just ask a lot of questions. That thing I think that you're not supposed to do as a kid, when it served me quite well as an adult,
Yeah, definitely.
Be like, why? Just because. So I was literally trying to make coffee, going on these courses and being taught 25 mil, 25 seconds. I was like, it just doesn't work though. This doesn't work. It's clearly more complex than that. And then I became aware of barista competitions, and somebody said, oh, you should go and train with David Makin, who was the Australian barista champion at the time. And he offered these courses one-on-one. And I think I was only supposed to be an hour. And 3 hours later, he was like, I think I'm going to have to go. And he was super nice. He dropped me and Leslie, my wife, back to our apartment. And that was the turning point for me. He was honest. He had a whiteboard. And every time there was a question of why, and he didn't know, he said, I don't think anyone in coffee knows. Or it's more complex, or we've learned this, or we still need to learn more or research this. And I became aware coffee was at this interesting moment in time. And if I look back, definitely I got into it at an interesting time, and it's still interesting, obviously, probably more so. I came back to the UK, we started an events business, we served coffee at music festivals and shows, and it was pretty niche then, like pretty cool, almost like sort of an indie music scene or something. And it was funny because I was always interested I was so passionate about hospitality. I didn't think anyone was doing a very good job of engaging people in the story of coffee. Like, it was, if you knew, you knew. And it was super sort of niche and underground counterculture. And I was like, look, I think you could create an environment where your sole goal is to communicate about coffee, which a cafe doesn't do a very good job of. A cafe is doing loads of other stuff. And this was always the friction with specialty coffee and cafes, right? Mm-hmm. Which is, you got to serve a bunch of different drinks, different customer types. And I was like, let's do something focusing just on great coffee and be sort of unapologetic about it. And for me, the challenge from a hospitality point of view there was, how can you understand people and an environment to do that? So don't just restrict the menu and put good coffee on and force people to do something. There are parts of it, like the way you design your shop and the way you design your menu and the way you speak to people. And we still do that today. Like, when someone comes in and they ask for a drink that we don't recommend, you always start with a positive. But right. So like, it's like lessons in how to talk to people. I think that's the difference. Most people get given a hospitality job. They get no training in how to speak. It's just like, you got to make that. That's how the till works. Off you go. So it's like, okay, someone comes in and asks for something that you don't recommend because of what you're trying to do. And you say, well, of course you can have it. But what we would say is, and you would do, there's little things, right? So if I say to you, we're different, we're doing this, straight away, it's not you, it's us. if I then explain how what we do is based on customer experience, which it is, right? Like the whole sugar thing is because in the early days, this sort of bright, sweet specialty espresso, you put sugar in it, it tastes like lemon.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a customer coming to me, this is like 12 years ago. And I said, oh, try it without the sugar. And they did. And they said, oh, so you know it goes sour with the sugar in? And I was like, well, yeah. And they said, why didn't you tell me? And I remember being like, that's a fair point. So I think a lot of people look at some of what we've done of like recommending filters without milk or espresso without sugar, and they think it's just like this purist anti-customer approach, but it's the opposite. It's going, okay, if we're really committed to presenting coffee in this way, let's frame it properly. Let's consider customers' experience. And you do that, it's hard. And the early days were really hard. People were like, it's just coffee. What are you on about? But you then build a reputation and you're committed to the vision. We knew we needed to create a destination, which is when we moved to Bath. We're not from there. We looked around the UK and we thought it made a lot of sense. I look back now and pretend that I chose it because, you know, I realized the demographic and the local economy and the tourism and the tech. But really, we just like, it just felt good. Right?
Yeah, intuition.
Yeah, intuition. And so yeah, then we opened the shop, and then the cool thing, and I still believe this to this day, is if you do something interesting, interesting people will come to you, or you'll find other interesting people, and it's like a magnet approach. Build it and they will come, right? And that's the benefit. Like if I start a project which is harder to get going in the short term, it potentially, if you've got a strong vision, 3-4 years down the line, you build a reputation, you build a tribe, you build an audience, a word of mouth. So that started to happen. And then I started taking part in barista competitions because, you know, a lot of the most interesting experiences I'd had as a barista were around people who have been in barista comps, like David Makin back in Australia, easily the best person I'd spoken to about coffee theory, barista champion. I went to the World Championships 2010 in London. And really, just to sum it up now, historically, 2009 to 2015, we had the one shop in Bath, and really it was, we created that shop for us, right? Like we want to explore coffee. We believed that people would jive with that and there'd be a customer base for it. That shop, you know, professors from the university would come in, people from the coffee world would come in, I've met all sorts of people. I love hospitality for that. You can meet, you never know who you're talking to, and you learn from all sorts of people. You don't just learn from, you know, some person with an incredibly successful career in their industry. You learn from, it's just amazing. I love it. Actually, something I miss a bit is I rarely work in that kind of environment now. I spend far too much time on emails.
So as you can imagine, Maxwell and I covered quite a bit in this conversation. Well, mostly Maxwell, and more than I could fit into a short YouTube clip. So if you are interested in the full uncut version of this chat with Maxwell Colonna-Dashwood, pop down in the description. There's a link to my Patreon. So whether you're the coffee lover, coffee nerd, or the coffeepreneur, all three tiers, you can go download this file, listen to it on your own time, take it all in, and otherwise stick around. Now would be a great time to subscribe because I'm going to upload more clips from this chat in more easily digestible YouTube videos. And until then, I look forward to seeing you in the next video.